Hi there. I want to welcome Brooke Jackson to the Dr. Mollie James Show. Brooke has been an inspiration and movement on her own in the COVID truth telling movement. She was a whistleblower on the Pfizer trials, and I wanted her to come on today because she has just been an absolute trailblazer in the lawfare side of this. So, Brooke, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dr. James. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. So for someone who's not heard the name Brooke Jackson before, if they've been living under a rock for 5 years, tell them how you. I like to think of myself as an accidental activist, and maybe you're kind of in the same boat with that. How did all this start, and how did you get involved?
That's a great way to describe what got me here as well. I was working as a regional director for Pfizer's phase 3 clinical trial for their vaccine. And I always say vaccine in like air quotes, so nobody get mad at me. Um, but I was working on their trial in September of 2020. So before any of the authorizations, any of the approvals were given, we're testing the vaccine on volunteers who volunteered themselves for science, and were willing to step up to that and volunteer like I said, themselves, their bodies, their data, to find out how this product, or if this product was safe and effective. So I was running these clinical trial sites here in Texas at 3 locations. And as a regional director, I was basically in charge of the day to day of this clinical trial, the conduct of it at these 3 sites. So, a lot of like HR type stuff, but I also was brought into this position because of my 20 plus years experience in running these trials and auditing data. So that was one of my responsibilities, was to go through the 1,000 plus patients that we had already enrolled and verify and confirm that the data that we were collecting and reporting back to Pfizer was accurate.
Mhm.
So as I'm going through these thousands of patients, I'm finding, in my audit, that we're not informing patients of all of the risks involved, their responsibilities in the trial, not giving informed consent. So that was number one. I mean, the list of action items that I found at just these sites was enough for me to request that upper management, other leaders in my team, immediately pause the trial. We were unblinding patients, which injects an incredible bias into a study, which you do not ever want. Again, the patient safety was my number one concern. We were not reporting adverse events. We were so um, overwhelmed and flooded by the number of problems that these patients were experiencing after they were given the shot. We couldn't keep up. So it was my recommendation that we immediately pause the study, and we contacted Pfizer to let them know what was going on, and my company just refused to do that and refused to, just ensure that there was integrity, that these results were accurate, and I just felt, it was my responsibility, ethically, morally, to contact the regulators, and in this case, it was the FDA.
So, were you a Pfizer employee, or you were a contracted employee through a different company?
Yeah, the way that these clinical trials, and I'm sorry, I might be bouncing around a little bit, but the conduct of clinical trials is pretty complex, and Pfizer doesn't just have a database lying around of people interested in participating in trials. So they contract out to organizations who do have access to patients. That's doctors' offices, other research organizations. So I worked for Ventavia Research Group, who was a contractor
Mhm.
under Pfizer.
Mhm. Okay. And so when you started raising these alarm bells, I mean, clearly 20 years of experience in the field, somebody should have paid attention to you. And what was the response you got when you raised that red flag?
I was very careful when I was raising these concerns initially
Mhm.
to my company. I'm a brand new employee,
Mhm.
but I really, my focus was informed consent patient safety, data integrity. And if they weren't going to get behind that, which I quickly realized, it was not just my company, it was Pfizer as well. And I guess initially the feedback was positive, encouraging. We were gonna, do these corrective action plans, and we're gonna, just do all these things that needed to be done. We're gonna, follow up with these patients more regularly and more closely, and involve other doctors, get more staffing, and, that just didn't happen as quickly as I thought that it needed to.
Mhm.
So, yeah, it was very disappointing. So
Mhm.
with my company and with Pfizer especially, so I thought, I'm gonna contact the FDA, and I did that on the morning of September 25th of 2020, and it only took them about 6 hours to fire me
6
after.
hours
Yeah, 6 and a half.
because you raised concerns about the conduct of a research study.
I believe so. I mean, that's hopefully one of the things through the lawsuit that I have now that we would obtain during discovery, but it wasn't. You know, I mean, they were appreciative. I have the receipts, right? That they were proud of the things that I was coming forward with. They were, making
Mhm.
these promises to make these changes that weren't just in the best interest of science, but that were legally required. We were breaking the law. And so, for me to make that call to the FDA, speak to the FDA, and then 6.5 hours later, you lose my job. We think my attorney team thinks that, once I made that call, FDA contacted Pfizer, Pfizer
Mhm.
contacted my company, and I got fired on the spot.
So, what that tells me is that if they can respond in that way, they could have responded to the positive on the concerns that you raised as well. They had the processes in place to take action to the positive if they wanted to.
That's a good point, and, that I believe, that they didn't do that because Pfizer it was a race, right? It was a race
Mhm.
to be first to market, and if you remember, Moderna was only 7 days, exactly a week behind Pfizer in obtaining their EUA.
Mhm.
So, that if they would have excluded the data from my clinical trial sites, that would have
Mhm.
set them behind some, and
Mhm.
they would have come in second.
So, at what point in this journey did you realize that you were really onto something big? And did you ever fear for your safety?
Um, when did I notice I was onto something big? I guess probably December 10th of 2020, a day before the FDA gave Pfizer their EUA, when, that famous New England Journal of Medicine, uh, you know, article came out. And on just based on those numbers, I recognized that they did not exclude my site's data, and that they included this data that had, although it was just 3 sites, and about 3% of the overall number of enrolled patients.
Mhm.
I'm not a statistician. I don't know what you're like in that area, but I know how that can potentially skew results, especially
Mhm.
when they're looking at specifically 170 patients that developed COVID in the study. So that's when I recognized, okay, something's off here.
Mhm.
And because I knew that this experiment was funded with taxpayer dollars, I knew that I had a potential lawsuit, not just because I was retaliated against, which I believe that I was wrongfully terminated. I
Mhm.
believe that, the data that was used was based on fraud, and because of that, I had a potential False Claims Act lawsuit, which is just what I explained a when federal taxpayer dollars are used to buy something that is not what they claim it to be, safety, effectiveness, etc., that
Mhm.
I could file that lawsuit on behalf of the United States government to try to recover
Mhm.
those taxpayer dollars.
Mhm. Okay. So what happened next? So you got fired, and then where did you go after that? Like, how did you know who to trust? Because if I remember correctly, that was kind of a wild time, and the rhetoric was getting pretty hot, and there was a lot of money at stake.
Yeah, we're talking 1.9 billion dollars for the initial purchase of a product that's not as safe as they say it is and not as effective as it is. Obviously, that's why we're on booster number what now? You know, I just remember
Seven.
watching the news and not really at that point recognizing that whole, you know, ecosystem and how that works, how the media what I didn't recognize. And it's okay for me to say it now, but back then I was really embarrassed because I thought, why did I not know? Like, how did I not realize this? How did I not know that this is the FDA way and Pfizer way? I was really I say traumatized because that's what I felt like I was, and it made me question what else did I help bring to market that I know is hurting people. But that realization for me didn't come until much later. When I filed this lawsuit, it wasn't about vaccines are good or vaccines are bad. It's about what data are we using to support these approvals? And why are we allowing fraud anywhere near our drug approval process? And as you just, I had obviously a little bit of time on my hands because I didn't have a job. I just started researching and reading court opinions and journal articles and just really diving into kind of my where I like to stay or try to stay focused in my activism is how long this has been going on. Like how many other drugs are out there that whistleblower came forward and said, "Here's the data." Here's a perfect example, Dr. Andrew Wakefield and the MMR vaccine. They handed the government over the documents to show that Merck was lying. There's fraud there. Why is that product on the market still? Well, these are all questions that were kind of running through my mind, but it
And if
all
anybody and if anybody has a question on that, the movie Protocol 7 actually does a beautiful job of going through Andrew Wakefield's history and how that was brought to light. That they go through the documentation and they explain it very well how the study was corrupted. I didn't know all of that. I found that
like what
very.
and I guess I don't know, wanna this has been a tough 5 years for me, but I still have my health, I still have my children's health, so I feel like I don't have any, like, room to, complain very much about that, but this has just been devastating, uh for me, emotionally, financially, I'm okay. I'm not like trying to brag or anything, but my husband and that I have done okay without that additional income. But it's more about the knowledge of again, the harms that have come. I know you were at the premiere of Follow the Silence last night, and that really is where my story kind of really begins, I think, Dr. James, because, as I'm recognizing, these things and I can't even, like, point my finger to one thing that stood out more than the other. It was just like a combination of me getting fired, the FDA never going to Ventavia to inspect these trial sites, for me to understand the process and learn the process because I didn't even know at this time how data gets from a patient that's in a trial, how that data goes from the patient and the site over to Pfizer, then over to the FDA, and then into your baby's arm. When you understand that flow, it'll change everything for you. Like, and
And
I
I wonder.
don't yeah, go ahead, sorry.
No, that's okay. I wonder if some of that emotional is just the loss of integrity of your whole field. I mean, that's what you're getting at because I had the same thing on the medical side. To me, medicine was like ethical, and there's a way you treat patients, and you don't judge, and informed consent, and you respect them, and they have autonomy. And to see how badly the medical field failed, I bet we have had the fall from grace, if you will, from my profession that I was so proud of. And I just lost respect for so many of my colleagues I thought they were smarter than that.
Yeah. Yeah. You're right. I remember years into it, I'm like, where are all the other whistleblowers? I mean, we're talking about a worldwide study. That there's 131 sites,
Mhm,
probably, 100 of me who were doing the same thing. And I know that they saw this. I mean, they
mhm,
were getting the same study communications that I was getting from Pfizer. So surely they recognized these things that were flawed in just the overall design of the study. It did. It was very, these I thought were my colleagues, the same thing I felt about FDA in kind of a detached way. You know, I trusted them. I trusted them to do their job, and they failed.
mhm,
And, again, this lawsuit that I filed was not vaccines are good or vaccines are bad. It was it's about data integrity and our drug approval process.
mhm,
And, as I'm recognizing all of these things, right? How people were getting censored and losing their Facebook accounts, and all these things are kind of coming together for me. But still, it wasn't about vaccine injury at all. It I will be honest with you, my kids were completely up to date on the childhood immunization schedule. I was up to date on mine. I wasn't looking necessarily at the platform even, the technology that was being used. It was about the study conduct for me because that was my area of expertise.
mhm,
And when I filed this lawsuit in January of 2021, it was January 8th. So less than a month later, we'd already like had our brief written, we've already collected evidence, and we're ready to submit this $1.9 billion lawsuit against Pfizer and, their subcontractors, my company. And I thought, "Okay, the Department of Justice is gonna see what I have. They're gonna see this evidence that I handed over to them, and the American people are gonna get a refund, and Pfizer is gonna get in trouble and be fined, or and they were also under a corporate integrity agreement at the time that this lawsuit was filed. So I thought,
That's
okay,
so flexible.
we're gonna get right. Why would the US government contract with a criminal organization, not just convicted one time, but multiple times across a span of decades? It and I didn't really know all of that at the time, but now I do. And now I'm like, WTF? Like, I really don't get it. And I, I will probably say this a million times other than the word um on your show today. But like, why? Like, what is going on? I don't know what else to say. But I thought, this lawsuit's filed, it's under seal, so no one can talk about it, and that's not a bad thing. It's so that the government has time to investigate what Pfizer did and not tip them off. So they had 60 days to do that. I've seen investigations spin up in Washington quicker than that. So I thought this is going to be over quick.
Mhm,
And that didn't happen. They requested extension after extension after extension, and I believe now that they did that so they could get as many shots and as many arms as they possibly could, and then
mhm.
move on quickly to secure a full biologics license, and then make the mandates, and then get it on the schedule, and I mean, it's just whoa. Um,
So
so
Pfizer filed the extension or the DOJ?
It was the DOJ. Yeah, so this is a DOJ investigating. I mean, we had HHS, OIG. I mean, when when I blow the lid off this thing, and I'm kind of like restricted because we're still in court, but when I blow the lid off this thing and I show you who's involved, who, what, where, when, why, how, I'm mad. Like, it takes everything out of me just to keep my mouth shut. And not even shut because I'm on it. Like, everybody knows what Pfizer did, but
Uh-huh.
the people that are allowing this to continue are people that are standing up in front of the United States people and are lying.
Mhm.
And it
I was just
just
gonna
it
ask you, we're hearing this movement because that's us Maha people, right? I was MAGA and then I was Maha, make America healthy again. And they're like, just be quiet. We're working on it. It takes time. I think that's bullshit. I think they can pull it today. And there
yeah,
are
they can't.
there are 25,000 babies getting injected with this every day, I believe. 25,000. And so I think it's bullshit and I'm calling bullshit. Like, pull it. That's your authority in the positions that we got you elected and appointed into. So you have information that maybe will back that up, then we'll hear that someday.
Well, and it's not a secret. I mean, it's all out there. It's just my opinion of all of these things, right? Like, there's
Yeah.
no way I would keep anything from you guys. It's just kind of like
Oh,
how I'm fitting everything together and where everything falls in place. So just
yeah.
I don't you got because all I have is my truth, and that's why it doesn't bother me to keep telling this story and why it is repetitive, but I don't mind saying it because it's the truth. The story never changes. So I don't have to prepare for these things very well.
Mhm.
For very long. I have to do my hair and makeup. That's it.
Right.
Um, but
So
the
when you spoke out, because that was such an act of bravery and it was so counter to everything that we heard. Did anyone else reach out to you? Like, I found that a beacon of truth attracts other people. So did you have other people that came to you and said, kind of joined with you?
well, in some people's defense, I guess. I mean, this was September of 2020, Dr. James. So it wasn't at that point where it really got ugly with, you know, actual full on like scale against people who were trying to talk, truth. So
They weren't even
yeah,
out yet. They were
they
just
weren't.
coming.
Exactly, they were just coming, so that I really didn't get that,
Mhm,
and I filed the lawsuit so quickly that and then it was under seal, I couldn't talk about it, but
mhm,
as the months progressed and they're really just what they did to me. They made me believe that they were investigating and that they
mhm,
were going to use my company and the other people that uh, they knew about who had corroborated my story. They were going to use my company to wrap Pfizer up and hold them criminally responsible. They were looking at going after these companies, from that from like a criminal side as well, not just civil, but
mhm,
criminally. And
mhm,
so I'm excited, not excited because here I am. I'm watching, this emergency use be given. And
mhm,
then, my lawsuit's filed, it's under seal. Then the emergency uses keep coming for all of these different age groups. And when they came after the 12 to 15-year-olds, which my kids at the time fell into, I just told the department, I've told my attorneys at the time, which is a completely different team than what I have now. I
mhm,
said, if this gets authorization, then I'm just going to come forward and I'm going to take this story to I think I threatened them with Tucker Carlson. I don't know Tucker. I've never been on Tucker, but at that point I recognized, okay, like Tucker kind of tells the truth. I think like to me he's more like a funny guy and a comedian, but I'm going to tell on y'all. I'm going to tell everybody what you're doing because I wanted people to be able to make an informed decision about what they put in their body. It was about informed consent. I don't have to tell Tucker that I filed this lawsuit, but I can tell him how these trials were run. And that may change someone's mind. It may not. Again, at this point, I didn't even care. This was in September of 21. Again, it wasn't a vaccine war. It was data integrity and our drug approval because
mhm.
it wasn't until I took and I at that point I started to think about it. Okay, maybe Tucker's not even a good idea. But when I did that, my attorneys like I don't know what you say, like they withdrew from representing me. They dropped me. They fired me and said, "Go find a new attorney." Because I wanted to just tell the people what happened. Not violate the law, not break the seal. I just wanted to tell people about my experience. And I
Mhm.
knew that I could do that because I'd done my own research and was starting to read law cases and information about whistleblowers. And so I knew I could. They told me I couldn't and then fired me. So that took me to the British Medical Journal and Peter Doshi, who works for the British Medical Journal and has forever been calling for more transparency in the clinical trial process. And so I thought, perfect. I'm going to take it there. I'm going to give everything to Peter Doshi, and who wasn't directly Peter Doshi. They ended up hiring an investigator, Paul Thacker. But I gave everything to Paul Thacker. He writes this, you know, investigative piece on how what I saw,
Mhm,
witnesses from my company, and that's where the British Medical Journal publication came in.
mhm,
And at that point, to about 2 months later, is when the Department of Justice officially declined to get involved in my case. And what that means is, at the point that they declined, there were, I guess, three options. One, they could they could dismiss the case because what I revealed was like a national security secret. They have ways to get rid of cases legitimately, right? There's a legitimate reason to dismiss this case
mhm.
for X, Y, and Z. They
Yeah.
didn't invoke that. Uh, they didn't join the case, which they could have done. They could have helped me, you know, bring this fraud to light and prosecute Pfizer for what they did, and they didn't do that. Or they could just kind of back off and decline to intervene, but not dismiss the case. And that's what they did in mine. They just said, "Go ahead, Brooke. Your case has merit. Otherwise, we could have dismissed for that reason as well. It's meritorious.
Mhm.
So, but we don't want to get involved right now. But keep us updated." And
Keep
so
us
at that
updated. We're the
yeah,
DOJ, but keep us updated what you find on your own.
do your thing, girl. So I said, fine. I'll go at this alone. I don't need the government, because that's a partial assignment that Congress gave to me as so I'll get into this in a minute, but they assigned me this right to sue on the government's behalf. So it's, Brooke Jackson v. Pfizer on behalf of the United States of America. I want our money back. I want a refund because you said your product was safe, you said it was effective, and it's not. And that's been proven year after year after year.
Mhm.
And so at that point, I'm without an attorney, right? So through friends of mine and friends of Secretary Kennedy, that's how Robert Barnes became involved in my case. Is from RFK Jr.
'Kay.
And that isn't that crazy? Like, it just uh, that's wild that you've never heard him talk about this case. He knows this case. He arranged the attorney for this case through, whatever that looked like. I don't know. I
Mhm.
didn't even know this until like 2 years ago. So Barnes had already been my attorney for like a year.
Oh, you
Um,
didn't know that Kennedy set it up?
no, mm-mm, no.
'Kay.
So then, Warner Mendenhall becomes involved, another amazing attorney, and then there's Lexis, who's also with Barnes, and then Jeremy Freeman, who is another False Claims Act attorney, and then there. I mean, there's so many people working on this case because it's like, it's right in your face, it's right there. There's fraud. And I'm just grateful for everyone's help. I've met some amazing folks, and
Mhm.
have the support of you and, Dr. Bowden and, Dr. Lynn. I mean, they're just, and it's crazy because like a lot of us are from Texas. So I always say Texas connects us in a lot of ways, but I'm so grateful for the support. And again, the Department of Justice has never once said that this case doesn't belong, doesn't have merit, doesn't,
Mm.
um, let's get rid of it for that reason.
Mhm.
So sorry,
Okay.
I could talk about this all day long.
So, yeah, and I keep coming back to I don't wanna belabor this too much, but people have been killed for a lot less. Like, do you worry about your physical safety?
No, no, I just, maybe in the beginning a little bit, like, 'cause some
Mhm.
weird stuff happened. Robert Barnes talks about this a little bit and what, you know, kind of what led up, but, I think me being so just straightforward and honest and providing documents, that's the whole reason my iambrookjackson.com exists, is because I wanted the information out there.
Mm-hmm.
And the information that I have that everybody doesn't know about is in different places. And that was at the direction of my attorney team, because if something does happen to me, then, you know, it's all out there and people will know why. I'm not afraid to die. And I think that that's something that, you know, looking back when this pandemic started and the media and the fear mongering, um, I fell for it a little bit, but now in retrospect, I'm not afraid to die. I'm not trying to be a but spiritually, in my faith, like I don't want to right now. Like I want to see my kids grow up, and I want to see Pfizer be held. I want so many things out of life. So I'm not ready to go, but that's not something I imagine I'll hate. You know?
Good point. Good point. And it's not even, I mean, you've got the big pharma side of that, but you also have the crazy ass people are on the other side. When you
Yeah.
look at the people who are, you know, just they're nuts, these vaccine advocates, if you will. They're
Yeah,
just
that is like a cult, right? And it's true, because when I hear people say that, when I heard people say that initially, like cult-like,
Mhm.
I had to go and study that. And it's true. It's like a religion, and Aaron Siri does a great job explaining that. Um, and some of the writing and interviews that he's done.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just wild. But again, this my whole lawsuit, my whole reason for being here, my advocacy is about the drug approval process and fraud in research. It
Mhm.
it it became and is something else, but I don't belong to the the MAHA org or the MAGA org. Like to me, that's not even to me,
No.
those things are feelings. Those are individual feelings about what greatness and health mean to you as an individual, not a
Mhm.
collective group think. I just aren't we trying to get away from that? Aren't we trying to be radically transparent and nix our conflicts of interest? And that's kind of what's been shocking to me. It's not that I care that uh, you know, we don't believe in the same thing, or whatever this whole fight is. It's the things that led us to where we are with this COVID crisis and everything that was revealed from it. I
Mhm.
want out of that. I
Mhm.
want out to
So
to either
your
make a
implications, yeah, so your implications actually reach so much further beyond just a vaccine. It's all
choice.
drugs that get thrown through the pipeline, right?
Yes, yes, and it's even, like my friend Kim Witzak, she has this amazing, like, spider web, uh, um, diagram that she has, and it just shows you, like, the how it reaches so many different places, and bottom line is, like, these are failures of our regulatory agency. It leads back to them because either one, they don't understand the data process flow, or they don't care.
Mhm.
And their perceived role in keeping our drugs safe, effective, and potent is just another one of the lies. And I want to help Dr. Macri, whatever how I say Macri, but it's McCary. I want to help them. I want to help. I want to look at these guidelines um, for the way that clinical trials are designed, conducted, analyzed, a- and from my perspective, at the very base of where the data comes from, help you with that. And
Mhm.
and they don't want my help because I call I call them out for things that I see.
Mhm.
And, and that's fine. We'll find other ways to get the information to the people, which is where it belongs.
One of the things that bothered me throughout all of this, and I'm not one who likes to read a paper and analyze it and break it down. I just don't enjoy that process, but it's necessary sometimes. And paper after paper after paper came out talking about side effects, talking about complications, talking about adverse effects. But the conclusion was the vaccine is safe and effective.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you just gave me 15 pages of problems and your conclusion doesn't match. And I'm like, did anybody actually, all these doctors on social media that were against the truth speakers, that were just telling what we saw before our own very eyes? And they would say things like, well, where's your published studies? I'm like, well, look at the study. Did you just read the title or did you actually look at anything in the body of it?
Well, they read the title. I almost called you Mary. Um, I think I did. Sorry about that, Molly. Um, but they do. They read the title and the conclusion, and they just take it for that. And I was so guilty of that myself so often. You know what the who likes to, well, I do now. But at the time, I didn't like to just sit there and read and analyze, and I didn't have time to make sure that their numbers, actually added up. And I think we're all guilty of that in
Mhm,
one way or another. But that's one of the, if I'm trying to find positives, that's one of them that's going to come from
mhm,
this. And unfortunately, I just don't know how to make everybody see, or how we reach those people that just don't know. I'm worried about my neighbor down the street and her kids that are out on their tricycles, and she's still taking them to the pediatrician and getting them loaded up on the schedule. That when you look at the information, it just doesn't square. Like
mhm,
I don't know how to reach those people. The only thing I could do is just keep talking and hoping that
mhm,
these new appointments through Trump's administration, you know, um, change things. But then I think, what's going to happen in 3 years, or when another party gets into office and they change them right back? And I mean, it's a constant battle of truth wins.
yeah, this area of it just shouldn't be political and it shouldn't sway with the administrations. It needs to be gutted. And if it can't be gutted, it needs to be burned down and rebuilt. And you can't take money from the people you regulate. That's just the dumbest concept ever. The FDA is mostly funded by the drug companies. Of course, their stuff's going to get approved. That makes no sense to me.
It doesn't make any sense to me either. Um, but I think there are plans to lower the amount of dependency that they have on drug companies. But still, I think any amount is an amount that matters, and
Mhm.
it should be completely funded. The regulators need to be funded by taxpayers. I
Yeah,
just believe that.
it needs to be all separate. All
Yes,
separate.
I
Yeah.
agree.
If anybody out there is a whistleblower that would have information for you or be able to support what you're doing, how do they reach out to you? How do they get you? I mean, if they're brave but late in the game,
Mhm.
is
That's
that still
okay.
useful?
I've been there myself.
Yeah.
So it's never too late to come forward. I would caution whistleblowers. That's why I had such a problem, not a problem with Doge, because I think their efforts um are needed. However, I I think some whistleblowers need to be protected, depending on the information that they have. And my fear was that if, you go to a at Doge underscore whatever whatever through a direct message, and you spill the tea, like, how's that direct message and that Doge effort going to protect you? There are whistleblower protections that are available to whistleblowers.
Mhm,
And so I wasn't a big fan of that. I tried to get the attention of Chuck Grassley, Senator Johnson, who are big advocates for and whistleblowers in general of
mhm,
the False Claims Act. We call Senator Grassley the grandfather of the False Claims Act, because he was huge in the 1986 amendments that happened there that gave us more protections, and kind of pointed out that if the DOJ doesn't just have this unfettered right to come in and kill cases when they want to. So he's just been a huge proponent of and supporter of
mhm.
me, not openly, but in the background.
Mhm.
Uh, so, I just would caution whistleblowers. If I'll just tell you for me, if I had to go back and do things differently, I would not have filed a False Claims Act lawsuit, expecting a government that I believe is involved in a lot of these fraud schemes to help me. I wouldn't expect that. Um, so I would I'm willing to talk to anybody, and maybe I'll change my mind tomorrow. I don't know. But looking back, I would have handled things. I would have found another way to get the information to the people that I know deserve it. And those are the people that paid for these things
Mhm.
and deserve informed consent.
If somebody's listening right now and moved by what you're doing and how you're really acting on behalf of all of us and want to help you, what are ways they can help you?
Well, I think supporting, doctors like you, that's one way. All the people that are kind of, I guess, it, I don't know. There's like a group of us, right? That I think are kind of saying the same thing in a different way. But support for me comes in the form of supporting guys like you and writing, just staying up to date on what's going on and not just what, the mainstream media is telling you, but paying attention, doing your own research. If you have questions about um, what anything, just do your own research. And I don't like to say this, but I'm gonna say it. Something that's got me um partly got me to where I am now, Dr. James, is I trust no one. I
Mhm.
do my own research. I mean, I might have a little bit of trust, but there's no way that I would fully trust anybody, and that's part of, the bad of this is that I'm from Texas. When I meet you, I wanna give you a hug. I don't wanna shake your hands. I want to be everybody's friend, and I wanna tell everybody the truth and expect that in return. It's like the golden rule. If you don't have anything nice to say, don't say it at all, or the other one, what's the other one? Treat everybody how you wanna be treated.
Mhm.
I've always lived like that. Now that something's changed in me, and I miss that girl, but then I'm like, well, now you do your own research, so it's kind of a good thing. I don't
Yeah.
know. But support, again, just doing your own research, supporting other doctors that you've that are saying the same things that you believe in. Finding something that means something to you and advocating for that. Like again, like I said, you don't have to be uh, straight up like diehard MAGA or Maha. Like to me,
Mhm.
again, it's the feeling. Like, who doesn't want America to be great and healthy again? I do. What does that mean for you? Can you go out in your backyard and grow your own vegetables? And I mean, I don't know. It's just that's a kind of a loaded question.
Mhm. Yeah.
But
Where
you
can
know what I
people
mean?
follow you? Where can they find you and keep track of this story as it unfolds?
Well, all of the court documents are kind of housed on my website. It's iambrookjackson.com. I'm not a fundraiser. I'm not fundraising. I don't need, any money. Again, that that part of my life has been okay. You know, my attorneys maybe, they're doing everything on a contingent basis. I think the last time I heard Robert Barnes say something about my lawsuit, from the time and money they have put into this case, we're talking about millions of dollars, but that's to be expected when you're going up not only against Pfizer, but now having to fight the United States government. Like it does cost money. So any support you can throw their way, I guess that would be helpful. But thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it. I feel like I've just been talking, 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 and I have so much to say. It gets a little scattered, but um, you know, this is a fight that I'm in. I'm in it to win it, and I don't care how long it takes. I'll take this as far as it has to go. Because, like you said earlier, people are dying, people are being hurt, and this isn't something that's just going to affect us for a little bit of time. We're talking about a generational effect
Yeah.
on our health.
Absolutely. Well, I just want to thank you for what you're doing because people like me, I don't have time to do that. my mission's different in this battle. And so
Right.
I'm glad there's somebody like you out there that's hammering it and keeps going and is persistent and won't give up, because that's what it's going to take. And I don't expect these people in government to save us. All I need them to do is open the doors so that the real warriors can get in there and handle business.
That's a
So,
great point, and that's exactly what we're asking them to do in my lawsuit and where it stands now.
mhm,
If you don't wanna help us, just get out of the way. I can take care of this myself.
mhm.
I
Yeah.
don't need I don't need the government. That's a great point.
Well, God bless you. I appreciate your expertise, and I hope to have you back and update us as this unrolls. And have a great day.
Thank
So,
you.
tune in next time for another episode of the Dr. Mollie James Show.